o ka wotea whakatakata hau ki te uru, whakatakata hau ki te tonga, kia mākina kina ki uta, kia mātara ki tai hea, ki ana te atakura, he teo, he hoka, he hauhu, i hei mauri ora. Mā te mihi tuatahi, mihi ki nā atua kaharawa, ka ho mai o kaha, ho mai o aroha, kia mātou i tēnei wā i nā wā katoa hoki. Tēnā koutou. Ka huri au taku whakaro ki nā tini aitua, ko wehe atu ki te pō, ai nā mati o ia marae, o ia pakiwā, o ia motu, haere, hari atu rā. Nā haere ki Hawaii ki nui, Hawaii ki roa, Hawaii ki whaumama, e nā mate, moi mai, oki mai. Apati hono, tātou hono o rātou ki a rātou, apati hono, tātou hono, tātou ki a tātou, e nā kaikauni hera, nā kaimahi, e nā maruhiri kua tai mai nei, tēnā koutou. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koe JJ, kōrua ko Geoffrey, ka hara mai ki te kōrero, ki tēnei kaunihera, kia kōrua nā kuri hoki, ai, tēnā koutou. So just standing to open us up this morning with Karakia and also Mihi, just acknowledging the things that are sort of bigger and greater than us, the gods of our creation, and also those that have gone before us and given us the gifts of life, but also to our manuhiri and all our councillors and staff that are here today, and particularly to JJ and Geoffrey who are presenting to us, and our awesome kuri there that have come in to show us what it's all about. So hand over to you, Peter. Kia ora koutou.
Yeah, thank you, Craig. Thank you for starting us off on the right foot. So this is the 566th meeting of this regional council. I've been informed that we have enough members to start the meeting. There are no other changes in business other than the fact when we go into PX, we will be leaving the last item till 1 o'clock, and yeah, hopefully we're through the rest of the meeting by then. I've got an apology only for being online from Genevieve Robinson, who's online. Is she online? She's not currently online, but I'm assured that she's going to be online. I'd like to just mention the fact that Sinead Gill from the media, I think she's from Stuff, is online also. So welcome, Sinead. No conflicts of interest, public forums and deputations. We have 2 public forums. And I'd like Geoffrey King to come forward. Mr. King is here today to talk about the social injustice of living in the wind shadow of 40 Metro Place. So welcome. You've got 10 minutes. Mr. King, you've got 10 minutes. We'll do a wee ballot at 1 minute, at 9 minutes, and then we'll have questions of you.
I've come here today to speak to you because I'm not very happy, especially with the governance from this outfit. I came to watch proceedings in the July public meeting. One councillor dozed off. The one next to him played with his phone. 2 over there chatted and laughed whilst the proceedings were in action. In 2006-2007, Trans-Pacific and Becker Consultancy warned of the odour problems associated with the composting plant. Yet you allowed the composting, not you people in particular, but ECAN allowed the OPP to open and operate it. And the rest is history and failure on the part of the ECAN. Failure in a big time. Subjecting residents, ratepayers, citizens to the stress of living in the environment. And I have a doctor's report here. The next will be a lawyer's. Living in the environment you have failed to control. Subjecting we who spoke up to lies, deceit, deception, abuse and bullying. It is a culture paramount within this organisation, not the councillors but the staff. No consultation with residents affected who live in the wind shadow from day one, not even in today's climate. This plant should have been closed from day one. It shouldn't have opened. And that's 14.5 years ago. But ECAN, too clueless, too gutless to uphold the laws. The Resource Management Act, 1991, you failed, you haven't upheld it. 2004 Clean Air Act, you've failed, you haven't upheld it. and the 215 WorkSafe Act clauses 42F, 43(2)D and 47 gives you all the ammo you need to close this plant. But no, the design build Simpson-Grierson legal document, contract 0607-192, read clause 3.9.2, no odour over the boundary. That went right over ECAN's head and has done so for 14.5 years. What about the ECAN's global warming, or is it the climate change philosophy you are supposed to uphold? The plant belches methane into the atmosphere like there's no tomorrow. It belches it into our houses, our properties. Becker, warning in 2015, read the report. You've got the report. Breaches the original consent, no over the boundary, but adjusted by stealth to allow such to provide it was not offensive. The odour is always and will always be offensive because of the content that's put into the plant. I don't know why you people do not understand the meat, the dairy, the fish. It's the problem. And you're going to allow it to go round the city council to send it round other composting plants, maybe. You're going to spread ECAN's own documents for breaches of the 1999 Resource Management Act, non-compliant, penalties over 600,000 for the first fine for an organisation, 10,000 for breaches every day thereafter the breach still occurs. It's in this document. I've got an example of it. Do you read the documents? Have you, all of you, read the Resource Management Act, the Clean Air Act? You're paid, you're supposed to have it inside out in the top piece, but no. It's an antiquated process, late 1890s World War I. Technology is the biofilter, which is supposed to control the odour. The odour goes straight from the composting chambers out into the atmosphere, and we've been bleating about this from the last 12 years when we understood what was happening. It affects about 80,000 people in this city. I was in Littleton 2 weeks ago, called to see a relative, stepped out onto her balcony, came back inside and said, that bloody OPP again. You can smell it over here. There was a northwest wind. My cousin came outside and said, we've had that smell for years. Have gone around the neighbourhood, the district, trying to source the cause. Where has ECAN councillors been over all those 14 years from Littleton area? AWOL, or do they not live like the city council representative, don't live in the area? In 2015, ECAN employee Mr. Balaam Barrett did a survey of those living in the northeast wind shadow. That's where I live. The result was that 86% of those surveyed said the odour was offensive. And these are people that work in the area as well. That was 8 years ago. And what has ECAN done? Absolutely nothing. Wait a minute. There's lies, deceit, deception to cover up the incompetence. You can point of order, Mr. Chair.
Can I just direct you to our standing orders adopted 21st of October 2021, 15.2. And basically in this one, it talks about a speaker to terminate a presentation at any time. The speaker is criticising elected members and or staff.
Okay, thank you. Look, Mr. King, I'll let you continue, but we cannot have you criticising staff, but I'll let you continue. I beg your pardon? I think that
You know yourself, sir.
Mr. King, Mr. King,
You've done nothing.
Mr. King, Mr. King, it also includes elected members. So it also includes criticism of elected members, but continue, please. I know you haven't. Point taken. Point taken. Continue. Can you push a button, please, so we can hear you?
A couple of examples of the incompetence. One employee came to Bayswater Park to investigate the odour complaints. He pulled a sand chair out of his boot of his car, went to the park and sat down. As he left, I asked him what did he detect? What was the rating? He said nil, no odour. All I could smell was freshly cut grass. Such was the intelligence, and he still works there. Another one, a young English lass.
You're still criticising staff. I appreciate that, but I appreciate that. But you're still pointing to the fact that staff from this organisation are not doing their job properly. Well, Mr. King.
You brighten away, guys, to get some sleep without the stink. We sleep in our bedrooms and bathrooms or in the roof of the house.
Mr. King.
You don't have a clue what we're putting up with.
Mr. King, if we could finish by not making those representatives towards staff and how they're behaving, that would be good. Thank you. Your button, please, Mr.
Another odour reporter, is that what would you call it? 4:30, 3 residents approached this person in the park. We spoke and compared notes and all agreed the rating was 4 out of 6. She went back to HQ, back to here. The next day, when the inquiry was made, the report there was no odour. Thus, the odour rating was nil. It's your job to know the laws and consents inside out, the penalties, etc. of what, that's what you get paid for, to look after us, but you don't. Some of you have been here a long time and have achieved nothing. We're still suffering from the problem. Pardon? Oh, he took up 2 or 3. Nah, you may as well.
No, we haven't.
You may as well lock the doors and throw the keys away. It's dysfunctional.
Thank you, Mr. King. I don't think we're going.
Pardon? No, you don't. Questions, because you haven't got the answers, and you're one of the biggest bullies that sit round the table. You had the woman in tears when we.
Mr. King, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the chamber because that's not. No, your behaviour, Mr. King, your behaviour, Mr. King, your behaviour is not acceptable. All right, I think we'll adjourn, and I think until Mr. King leaves the chamber, councillors can make it their way into the lounge. Thank you. Let's go. Okay, JJ, if you want to come to the table, please. And we've got the press here. There's obviously some interested. I think it's maybe the dog. Maybe they're interested. I'm not sure. And we have a photographer who I've given permission to take a photo of you when you're during your presentation. So, can somebody go and get Councillor Burns, please, and Councillor McKenzie. Okay, JJ, when you're ready.
Kia ora. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Councilman and Councilwoman, for allowing me to present on my proposal for dogs on buses. Just like to start to say, I think every councilman, councilwoman and staff member of ECAN are doing a brilliant job. No. Christchurch City Council has a mantra: in pursuit of balance, where residents, visitors and workers have the space to meet time for all types of play. Christchurch currently is the only major city in New Zealand that doesn't have a dogs on buses policy or about to implement one. To give you some background, dogs and pets in general have had a profound effect on humans for centuries, both physically, socially and mentally. The uptake in pet ownership during 2020 alone, due to the COVID-19 impacts, show that the benefits to mental health, stress coping mechanisms have been important. In Christchurch, we have nearly 40,000 dog owners. This has been an increase of about 13% annually for the last 5 to 6 years, which is more than the increase in humans. Dog owners have for decades been looking at alternatives to transporting their pets to dog parks, beaches, vets, etc., rather than using private vehicles. The carriage of dogs on public transport in Europe has been common for decades, without incident. Less so in the US, Australia, and New Zealand, but it's getting bigger, where the use of private cars dominates over public transport currently. The ability to allow dogs on public transport has many benefits, both in cutting down the use of private vehicles, health issues with having pets stuck in vehicles, and allowing humans to maintain connections with their pets. I'd also like to add, with the latest fuel costs, we want to not use our cars. Yes, it's a case study which was done in detail in Australia and Sydney. Like other cities, there was a need to reduce traffic and associated environmental costs. At the same time, urban planners seek to promote the well-being of citizens and the engagement with recreational spaces. Reducing people's dependency on cars by providing excellent public transport is one way to do this. But we also need to ensure that public transport is accessible and meets people's needs. It is a human and animal welfare issue. The study found that each household made an average of 3.8 dog-related trips by car each week. Considering there in Sydney are 4.9 million people living in Sydney and 1.6 million households, 39% which comprise at least one canine, there's a possible 2.4 million dog-related trips by car each week. I note that New Christchurch is somewhat smaller, but the stats say the same. This includes trips to the vets, 86% of which are by car. Concerningly, nearly 40% of dog owners surveyed said that lack of transport prevented them from taking their dog to a vet in the last 12 months. That was in 2014. To address New Zealand, I've just pulled up the stats for Auckland. I went to Auckland, Wellington, and Dunedin, the other major cities, and asked them these questions. They all responded, and they're all fairly typical. A, are drivers exposed to additional abuse? There's only been a handful of incidents on bus, none considered serious, and most were related to just the lack of information. Drivers weren't aware that big dogs were allowed on the bus, for example, was the common one in the first few days. Pets have been allowed on their trains since 2019 and no serious issues to report. Are more people getting on buses? More pet customers are using buses with pets. This was noted by all three that have noticed an uptake of people with pets. Actual figures hard to do because they don't issue dogs with tickets. Are there any issues with having dogs on buses? No particular issues. Customers in the main have welcomed the change. It is pretty standard stuff globally. Other safety measures with approved carriers for smaller pets, leads and muzzles for larger dogs exceed international standards. Do we really need to put the dogs in cages? Is dogs on leash appropriate muzzle better option? With Auckland, well, their approach during the trials has been baby steps. That gives us a lot of information that we can track into. They've done it with small pets and carriers first, and I'll talk a little about that later. But the feedback is preference for dogs, all dogs on muzzles and leashes. Additional benefits. People unable to drive and the elderly will have greater freedom to travel around the city with their pets. The biggest block to dogs on buses is ignorance and lack of exposure to dogs that are socialised. By allowing people to observe dogs in an environment will break some of these prejudice. This is currently happening. I take the Diamond Harbour ferry regularly to Littleton, especially to the farmers market. And every single time I have people approach me, all very respectful, kids, parents coming up, can we pet your dogs? That social interaction, especially with small kids, is really beautiful to see. And these guys, because they are pretty non-threatening to start off with, they love it. They're very socially adept. Well-controlled dogs on buses promote conversation and social connection. People that have come here in support of me have told stories of how they can interact with these, with the public. Cutting down on private cars is environmentally crucial. Increased use of council buses. Cost effective, as Auckland has shown more people getting on buses with dogs. And the PR value, not along with our mantra of being more inclusive, using recreational spaces and allowing all sorts of activity, it shows Christchurch is a pet-friendly environment, which it is in so many regards, except for the transport. Limitations. Size can be an issue and large breeds of dogs are a challenge. But with understanding and management, using the responsible owners list, which Christchurch Council currently has, and the use of leads and muzzles, it becomes a non-issue. Dog behaviour. Dog would always need to be restrained, either by carrier, leash or muzzle. Preference is the later. A, because I don't like putting animals in cages. And the biggest one is, if you get on a bus to go into town, personal experience coming from Banks Peninsula, what am I going to do with 2 dog carriers when I go shopping? There's not a lot of storage space around this place. And it's just, so it stops me taking it, even if I had it on carriers. But that's personal. Dogs in space. Dogs should only travel during off-peak hours, and the driver have the right of refusal if the bus is crowded. You know, we're not an arbitrary group of vigilantes. We would just like the opportunity to get our dogs on buses. Allergies. The empirical information notes that only 10 to 15% of New Zealand has a dog allergy, and mostly a minor. And from the rest of the country allowed dogs on buses, no reports of significant effects have been reported. Well-controlled dogs are no different to guide dogs and service dogs in allergic potential. Buses are cleaned regularly. Making a mess. It is the owner's responsibility to ensure dogs have done their business before entering the bus, but must clean it up if it happens, just as guardians of young children have to. Our proposal for a trial period to allow all dogs on the buses. Travel to occur during off-peak hours and weekends, and public is notified that the buses will have dogs on board. Dogs to be on leashes and a muzzle. Limit of 2 dogs per passenger if the dogs are under 7 kgs. The legal requirement is that you cannot have more than 2 dogs on properties that are less than 1 acre, 1 hectare. And 1 dog if they're greater than 7 kgs, because even I would have trouble picking up bigger dogs. Drivers have the right to refuse carriage if buses is crowded. Legitimate passenger concerns with unruly behaviour. A well-planned PR strategy is worked up to include the public, the manager, the drivers and the officials. And you can also utilise the community advocacy groups that are out there. Mine being the neighbourhood support coordinator for most of the southern part of the harbour. There's also a caveat in there that there is currently a responsible dog list that is held when you register your dog. This can be utilised as one of the means, either by once you become a registered dog owner, you could be issued a dog pass, or it could be included onto the Metro card or a separate card that can be used on the bus. Don't know all the full details and machinations of that. Thank you. But remember, in controlling dogs, it's not the dog's fault, it's the owners. So responsible dog owners know how to look after animals. And we want to get this trial on board. I will not fall on the sword and say all the proposals have to follow. If you want to say right now we still want to start off with carriers, right, we'll look at that. And the travel, I've found in Christchurch and the major cities, anything after 9 o'clock can be difficult for everyone out there. So if you want to put it in stop, no dogs after 9, then that wouldn't be an issue either. Thank you very much.
One dog I know of that you wouldn't let on a bus, and that's his spaniel, because it's never clean. But we'll go to Ian and then Vicky and then Dion and then Paul.
Probably wouldn't let me on a bus either, but my question really is about how we control antisocial behaviour, not from responsible dog owners, but our advice was when we were contemplating so-called free buses or no fares on buses, that would be counterproductive because that encourages elements of society who shouldn't be riding around buses. So in the same vein, if we were to charge a token amount to discourage antisocial people with antisocial dogs on the bus by charging for the dogs as well, would that be a game stopper for you guys?
No, it wouldn't be. And also, no, it wouldn't be. And also, if you have an antisocial dog, you're not likely to get a responsible dog owner, because that includes the right to check on your property. If you have any complaints, you know, if you want to retain that, and if you don't, you don't get it, so you can't get on the bus. That's what I'm saying. But even a cost, no. I think pet owners, pets are part of their family. If they're going to pay for kids, they'll pay for their kids.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. So I'm definitely uncertain about how I feel about this. I'll be really honest. I grew up with big dogs, and then in more recent times I've been bitten twice by small dogs. So I've actually found myself, all of a sudden, I've gone from being a dog owner who goes, why are people so anxious about these dogs? Because I was comfortable with the dogs I've been habituated with, and other people's. And then now I've been bitten a couple of times, really out of the blue and unexpected. One on my son's friend's house property, who are very responsible dog owners, and they've since taken some measures to avoid that happening again. But you know, it's made me realise how quickly and how much it can be, you know, a real problem. So I'm getting the sense you're talking about only having dogs with muzzles on the bus. So if they're on a lead, they would only be accepted onto the bus with the muzzle on. So yes.
Because there's all sizes. I researched it, even for my little guys who've got little small snouts. There are still muzzles you can get.
And it was a small dog, but it did quite a lot of damage to the back of my leg, which I was quite surprised at. Anyway, so that's good, just to clarify that bit. And then allergies. So my husband, turns out, unfortunately, is allergic to cats and dogs. And so I just wonder, do you know if there are face masks that passengers can use? Because I appreciate you're saying there's not issues with, you haven't had experience, or there's no reports of people having significant allergy responses, but there may be people who are worried about being on a bus with a pet because they know they'll have a serious issue, who may therefore choose counterproductively. We end up with dogs on buses, but some people then not going on the bus. So do you know, have you done any research into ways that people who do have an allergy and where it might be serious or just uncomfortable, like it's, you know, it's not nice to be left with, you know, difficult breathing. So, you know, is there some measure that passengers who have that issue could use to? And
I haven't done in-depth research, but the little research I have done is that there are coverings, masks for all sorts of issues, as we've seen with COVID, as we see with people doing gardening and compost and the various grades. One specific to dog allergies, I don't know, but as I say, most of it, all the reports, it's very minor, but even those that do suffer it, it's an inconvenience. So our recommendation is that clearly identify which buses are going to have dogs on so they don't get onto those ones. And
I think you're unpacking some of the stuff that we need to look at. All right. And I think that will be a responsibility once it comes back to us, and I'll sum up at the end on this. But so we've got Dion, Paul, John.
When you brought up the research or what Auckland is doing, it talked about pets, but I suppose most of your conversation has been around dogs. You've obviously know a lot more about the Auckland rules than I don't know them at all. But I've got 2 cats, and they're bigger than your dogs, and they're trained to go walking. I take them down to the beach and go all over the country with them and everything like that. But I was quite interested about the taking them to the vet. I take my cats to the vet every 4 months, and would be quite handy to sort of look, you know, take them on a bus potentially if I could, you know, put them on a leash and stuff like that. So is the rules in Auckland specific around dogs, or is it pets in general? Because I think you're talking more about dogs for yourself, but what have they done in Auckland?
well,
you need to press it.
the one with Auckland has been focused on dogs, but we did get talking. They say that other pets have been allowed on as well. Dogs seem to be the catalyst, the driver, because that's what a lot of people want to do. Cats don't tend to be, you don't see a lot of people walking around with their cats. Yeah, it's and so it hasn't been risen as such a major issue. Whereas every time you take a dog, it is on a leash and you take it for walks. And cats, if you need to do that, the main reason I see cats going is in carriers, so it's still an option if you want to put that on. But to be honest, I haven't done real research on cats or goldfish for that matter. But yeah, I know those little bit.
Thank you, JJ, and thank you to your fur whānau for coming in, and to the supporters that have come in to show their support for this. I've been in the same situation, living in Littleton and needing to get my dog through to the vets. So I can definitely empathize. When I didn't have a vehicle, it's very difficult to try and find a ride. I do find that I've taken my dog several times on Uber, and that's been easily managed. And yes, you've done some great research here. I think I've got less of a question, more of a statement that, you know, this information, there's a lot of it. It's been done by all the other major councils. It seems like something that we could put into the long-term plan.
Detail, and there's no question there, JJ, Paul. So I think that's the stuff that we need to look at afterwards, Paul. And I'm not trying to shut you down, but just we need to be relevant. John, and then Greg, and then we're finishing.
Thank you. The Auckland research, what rules do Auckland and on the buses with dogs? Are they required to be muzzled or the like, or what parameters do they set?
At this stage, the parameters are small dogs are in period.
Yep.
But that's about to be revised. This year they flew for big dogs. They have to be under their muzzle.
Cool.
Things big kind of true that small dogs and babies and dogs not, but there's not the there is a big dogs.
Thank you. Just get clarification of what you're asking in comparison. So I general support for it. Thank you.
Okay, Greg.
Good, I'll be brief, and thank you very much again for bringing everyone in. You basically talked a wee bit about identifiable well-behaved dogs. I know the Department of Conservation, for example, have coloured collars, and I know I'm getting into detail, but do you know if there's much research on that type of thing being used in a public transport sort of system?
No, I haven't heard any.
Thank you, JJ. Look, we'll call it quits there, but if you just stay where you are for this minute, we've got a resolution that we'll put up on the screen now, and that's our so it receives your public forum regarding 4.1.2, and that provide a reply to you as soon as practical. I think while we're unpacking that, there's a lot of stuff that you've brought to us today. There's a lot of things to think about. We have providers, bus providers, and there's a conversation probably needs to happen with them, needs to happen with drivers. There's a whole lot of stuff that needs to happen, but this is the first part of that process. So thank you for what you've done, and you've taken up a fair bit of time. Councillors are pretty interested in it. Good to see the dogs here. So have I got someone that will move that? Thank you, Paul, and a seconder. Thank you, Dion. So that's moved by Councillor Deche and seconded by Councillor Swiggs. All those in favour? All those against? That's carried. Thank you very much, JJ. Wait for dog mania to settle down and then we'll move on. I'm not quite sure. Thank you, councillors. I'm not quite sure since our first deputation ended the manner it did, what we do with the recommendation. And so I'll seek some advice. Maybe Robin, you could put your mind to that, not right now, but during the meeting, and when we get to the towards the end of the open part of this meeting, if you could give us some advice on that. I've got my own advice in my own head about that, but that's probably not as reliable as yours in terms of your knowledge of the local government act. So thank you. 4.2, we haven't got any deputations, we haven't got any extraordinary business, and we have got no notice of motion that I'm aware of. So I'll go to 7.1, which is the unconfirmed council minutes of the 16th of August. And they're on page 6 of your agenda. Are there any matters of accuracy related to those minutes?
Good, the chair. There is a in the Karakia, and then the acknowledgement of Flora and Mamaroa Briggs. Just on the second to last line, South Island Māori netball, not basketball. Thank you.
All right.
Capital Australia's daily activities and movement. So these are on page 1 through 4 of your agenda, and they contain and significantly order to make some just many the pension and benefit committee and individual transport committee So I'll ask the Petitions, Councillor Inch to speak to the Audit, Finance and Risk, and Councillor Funkel, and I'll speak to RTC.
Thank you, Chair. The Audit, Finance and Risk paper, the resolutions in this paper are noting the unconfirmed minutes. And at that meeting, unfortunately, some key staff were unavailable to answer questions raised at the meeting. And the minutes have recorded secretarial notes indicating that some replies are required. And the full replies to the questions, they're not in this unconfirmed paper, but they will be provided at the next meeting of the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee on October the 4th. And so at that time, confirmation and any discussion of the minutes and replies are going to take place at that meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A very good meeting of civil defence. We have been working to sort of uplift some of our work, our papers and our roles. Of note in those reports were the learnings from the North Island severe weather event and some actions that our staff on their return to Canterbury have put in place around how we can operate in business in a better space. So that was a particularly good report. We noted the independent review of Civil Defence and Emergency Management Group for Canterbury. The first executive conversation was held on Friday, and we meet at Selwyn tomorrow with the group, with the mayors, to further discuss where that's landed and look at some potential straw men and where we might look to uplift civil defence over the next few years, particularly in regard to long-term planning, what funding or costings might be available. We also saw the introduction of a draft CDM group recovery plan, the plan that's sort of put in place once we get past the response phase. What does recovery look like? Who's responsible? And a bunch of those things. So that draft plan is out for consultation around the TAs and has been presented to this council. The NEMA report, again, just highlighting some of the real challenges that we face within New Zealand. And one of the highlights, if you would call it that, on a risk basis, Bangladesh is the most riskiest place in the world to live, I guess to put it that, and New Zealand comes in as number 2 on a risk basis for natural disaster. So really concentrates the thinking, particularly at a NEMA level in Wellington, of how we start to develop our thinking, implications down the line for insurance, recovery, a whole bunch of things. So some very, I guess, important conversations happening as we realise our place in the world, particularly around risk and natural disaster. Thank you.
Any questions of Councillor Sunkel on that? There being none, I'll move to the RTC minutes, and I'd just like to draw your attention to the item that was in there on interregional passenger rail. And if you've read the minutes, and I'm assuming that you all have and fully understood them, I just want to go through them to make sure that we're correct, because the final resolution, which is on page 170 and contains 2.1, 2.2, 2.3 and 2.4, is reasonably repetitive in what it says. And there are some key words in there that push to the intent. So 2.1 is about putting the issue in the regional land transport plan for consideration. 2.2 is the activity that's being spoken about that's going to be in the regional land transport plan, and 2.3 is about the funding for it. So if you read them, you think, well, why do they keep repeating themselves? But that's the issue there. I know that I mean, I'll ask Councillor Burns, are you happy with? Not Councillor Davies, are you happy with that? Because you were there at that meeting, Joe. I think it is a bit confusing, but that's what it actually means. So there's no questions around that. We can shift to the recommendation. There we have it. Councillor, do you want to move that? And seconded by Councillor Sunkel. Question. Comment. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it's just debate. So I mean, it's I don't have the opportunity to sort of speak or say anything in the actual Audit and Finance Committee meeting. So I just wanted to sort of table my distaste for the 8.9 in the finance paper and the audit New Zealand audit fees. So obviously I can't say that in that meeting, and it was part of the public meeting, and I just wanted to sort of table that I do not like the process that Audit New Zealand is taking and the Auditor General, and I just wanted to publicly say that. And I think it is, personally, I believe it's something that all councils should be pushing back on a little bit, and I think it's just wrong what's going on.
I then noted. Councillor Swiggs. We'll note that. Thank you. Any other comment or question or debate? There being none, I'll put that moved by Councillor Edge, seconded by Councillor Sunkel. All those in favour, please say aye. All those against. And that again is carried. So thank you very much for that. So we'll go to 8.2, which is the resolution status report. And are there any issues around that? We have Petrea here to talk about if there are any issues around that, but in my mind, it's pretty self-explanatory in terms of things that are in there. Have a little bit of colour in there at the end of them, but not lots. Grant?
Thanks, Chair. Page 192, the item concerning request for a staff report on health and safety, or the idea of a standalone health and safety committee. There's a feeling that in order to progress that particular item and discussion on it, that staff will prepare a full report in the health and safety report at the November Audit, Finance and Risk Committee. And that discussion will take place there, and we'll go forward from there.
So, go.
And from that, a recommendation will come back to council for discussion and confirmation, whichever way.
My point with that is those issues were raised in general council discussion, and councillors are not on audit, finance and risk. So what you were saying, Councillor Edge, that will be discussed in audit, finance and risk. The recommendation will then come to a council meeting, or will it come to general council briefing, or where will it come?
I think to a council meeting. It will come back to a council meeting.
Well, along those same lines, Mr. Chairman, will those councillors who raise this issue, who aren't members of the Audit and Risk Committee, be able to talk at that Audit and Risk Committee? They should be able to.
A little bit, just an answer to that, and really the query in the last item from Councillor Swiggs. I refer councillors to page 35 of our standing orders, item 13.1, where it does say that if a member of the local authority is not an appointed member of the meeting at which they are in attendance, they may not vote on any matter at the meeting. However, they may, with the leave of the chair, take part in the meeting's discussions. So I think that is really suggesting that when we discuss that issue, councillors are invited to attend and councillors are invited to participate in the discussion.
That's understanding. Everyone's happy with that. I do not, from my point of view, I do not see why the right would be refused, because it's a right. So, yeah, so we're good. Right. Any other discussion? Joe?
192, just the standing orders report that we're expecting in October. Is that going to be a process report? Is it going to actually have an amended standing orders for us to discuss? Just in preparation for it.
I'll get the CEO to talk to that, because essentially there are some changes that are required to be made, but they're not substantive. We did discuss that yesterday. Stephanie?
Through you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Davies. The intention would be to make the corrections that need to be made, but certainly to have a workshop with councillors to work through those standing orders. Should there be any substantive comments or changes that you wish to make in addition to those, that would then be drafted, revised, and put to a future meeting, whether in October, November, whenever there was comfort for that landing. But engagement would definitely happen.
I think we're far enough into the council now. The council tend to understand one of those things that you know, you might want to change if you want to change anything, or those tweaks that might need to be made. All right, if everyone's happy, 8.2, the resolution is on the board there. So it's, can I get a mover? A move by Councillor Burns, seconded by Councillor, excuse me, Edge. All those in favour, please say aye. All those against? And that's carried, so thank you. 8.3 is, this is about discharging the CWMS Regional Committee. I think this is, you want to come forward, Tim? I'm not too sure if there'll be any questions around this. I think we've had a reasonable discussion on this, but if you maybe just want to give us a headline, then we can go from there.
Kia ora, and thank you for that. I think it is pretty clearly set out in the paper. This is seeking the discharge of the Regional Committee. Just a reminder, the Regional Committee is a committee of Environment Canterbury, which is different from the zone committees, which are joint committees of regional of Environment Canterbury and the territorial authorities. The reasons are set out, and I won't go through those again. I just to let you know that the members of the committee were advised of this proposal in August the 17th. Papatipi Runanga chairs were advised on September the 17th, and this has been raised with the Canterbury Mayoral Forum. And of course, the Canterbury Mayoral Forum doesn't have the decision on this, but it does have oversight of the Canterbury Water Management Strategy that this committee has been part of. The Mayoral Forum were in support of this proposal. And I'll leave it there. Happy to take questions.
Are there any questions of Tim? I think what we'll do, thank you, Tim. I think what we'll do is put the resolution up on the board, and that's going to be moved by Councillor Mackay and second, by Councillor Bourne. You don't want to second it, so seconded by Councillor Ward. Councillor Mackay, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think probably I just need to say that I've been a strong proponent of the Canterbury Water Management Strategy, and certainly I think I came in on the second meeting of the Regional Council as a representative and participated in that for quite a few years, actually, until relatively recently. I think this is a maturing of the Canterbury Water Management Strategy. We've got to acknowledge the work that's been done by all the members and the representatives that have participated in it since its formation in, I think, early 2009. So, but the context that we're now working in has actually changed. The Regional Committee was certainly set up in a place when we had, particularly when commissioners were in place here at the Canterbury Regional Council. Then we also had the fully elected council come on board in 2019 after a transitional council that was voted in 2016. And of course, more lately, we've got more national direction from central government around the freshwater space and particularly a lot of the target areas that the Canterbury Water Management Strategy works in. So I do think that it's probably appropriate that at this time we discharge it, but I really want to acknowledge the work that those committee members past and right up until the current ones have actually played in here, and particularly the Runanga representatives that have been involved right throughout since 2009 until lately. Okay.
I just endorse everything that Claire has said, and I just also would like to acknowledge all the work that's been done by past and present committee. And as Claire has alluded to now, we're getting more direction from central government. So I think this is just a natural progression to move on.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I agree with Councillor Mackay that it is a maturation of where we're heading, and personally I will support anything which which sort of discharges anything that was dealt to under the democratic process of dismissing elected officials.
Kia ora, yeah, just to reiterate the Mihi from Councillor Mackay. As my position as Timatanga on my last term, that I was the interim co-chair for Ngā Whakamutunga with Jane Detmer, who was the chair of the work of the current members of the current committee. As I said, Chair Jane Detmer, Angela Cushing, Dr. Andrew Dark, Kevin Gallagher, Cameron Henderson, Rima Herber, and Ross Millichamp, just for their workshops and the work they were willing to do, because they put their hand up and went through an interview process and they gave up their time. So even though we're just charging the committee at the moment, but as the chair of the Water and Land Committee, I just said I'd like to acknowledge their efforts, and then no doubt we'll be using them in the future for other areas working with. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Acknowledge all the words that have been said about the members of the committee. And the reason I didn't second is because I'm a little bit torn about this. I do acknowledge what has been said about where we've got to with the CWMS and especially with the planning RPS we're doing, and as well as the national guidance that's been given. I still maybe think there was a good reason to have an independent sort of voice to challenge us at times, especially as we go into the water plans that will come up, on our schedule from 2025 to 2028. So, yeah, that's why I'm a little bit torn about it. But I do support the need to look at it, as I support the need to look at the whole CWMS and how we structure that going forward, especially with our new planning that we will be doing. So, yeah, just wanted to say that. But definitely acknowledge all the members, past and present, as well, of this committee. I was one like Claire right at the start, and more recently in the last term, and worked pretty hard with that committee to do the most recent change. And I'm a little bit sad I never really got up and going in that sort of phase we just had. But I acknowledge what Jan said about the workshops that they did hold and the work that they did do. So yeah, just really acknowledging those people and thank them for their time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a slightly different view. Whereas I will acknowledge the councillors who thank the regional committee for their the voluntary nature of their work. This was a cost centre to this council, and actually the regional committee over the last few years has played no particular role, and yet it was costing this council money. And so it's absolutely appropriate that where those things are funded but not much is being achieved, it's appropriate for this council to look at that and review it and move on. And I note that I was the only councillor who advocated for this about 3 or 4 years ago when we first started reviewing it, and it's and I have a small degree of satisfaction that the whole council is now supporting me.
Well, I would like to protocol what Councillor Pauling said. So I think we had a very good collection of people who were put up for this committee, for the regional committee, and I'm really disappointed that for various reasons it wasn't able to actually really get off the ground, and appreciate there was some work done, but I think there was a lot of goodwill and good intentions to do some good stuff with that, and I think having that independent scrutiny, an organisation like Environment can actually be really critical, and they were good, knowledgeable people with expertise and local, so local understanding. But we are where we are, and I understand why we're discharging at this point in time.
Thanks, Chair. I think the regional committee in the past has done some really good work, and that's evidenced in the information conveyed in their reports. But I think I was looking at the next steps on page 198, and I don't think we're necessarily going to lose the skill sets of the people on that committee, and it is potential for us to call upon expertise as we think we need it. And similarly, the zone committees, if they feel there's an issue that needs addressing, we can go for that as well. So shame to see them go, but I think we're in the stage of moving on, and yeah, thank you.
I acknowledge that. I think we're not saying that we don't need that advice that those people give us, but I think there are different vehicles that we can use and be more specific about some of the issues that we have. We're really talking about things like a energy strategy and a food strategy and a water strategy and how they interact. What has it done? All that stuff's going on. So yeah. All right, then. Thank you very much for that. And I think we'll just do this and we'll pass this. And once that's done, then we've discharged it, and then we'll have just a wee discussion about what we're going to do about it. So moved by Councillor Mackay, seconded by Councillor Ward. All those in favour, please say aye. All those against? And that's carried. So thank you very much for that. And I think we will note that we need to acknowledge those people that have been part of this committee, specifically the mana whenua reps that have been involved in that, because that has been a reasonable deal. And I can remember being part of that committee, and the part of John Wilkie being part of that, and all the work that that we were possible to do with John and Lan and Steve Lowndes and myself around when we did that habitat for tuna, which was a great piece of work and a great cooperation and a great battle with Doc, actually, which was really cool. That's when the late Mandy was involved. Mandy Home was involved in that discussion too. So I think we'll do that. I think we'll take the appropriate advice, and from those people, maybe talk to Cam Smith, who's now got responsibility for them. So thank you for that. 8.4, amending to the committee schedule. And as you may realise, Zone 5 and 6, who are the local government representatives across the South Island, have decided to have their meeting in the Chathams, primarily to support the Chathams and all the travel that they do. But just to background that in terms of what we're trying to do here, Petrea, can you come up and explain?
Thank you, Chair Scott. Because we've had this event take place on the timing which we were going to have some of our meetings, we've just had to do a little change. So we're just proposing just some wee changes from the 23rd of November to the 27th of November for both the CRTC and the CWMS. Also just noting that there was an extra Canterbury Regional Transport Committee meeting on the 5th, which wasn't on our original timetable. And then, so just seeking the endorsement of the council for us to make those amendments to the committee and make that live.
Thank you, Petrea. Anyone got any? I think it's pretty straightforward. This actually, it's just a matter of us moving around to suit other people. So we'll put that up there. Got someone that's happy enough to move it. Thank you, Joe, and thank you. Seconded by Councillor Swiggs. Any discussion? If there's no discussion, I'll put that to you guys. All those in favour, please say aye. All those against? That's carried. So now moving to 8.6, and this is a notification of items to be released from Public Excluded. And again, sorry? Oh, have I missed one?
8.5.
I thought it was going real well. Yeah. Was I one ahead of myself there, Petrea?
No. You just did these are for the terms of reference.
Yeah.
The one you just did was.
Oh, look, I've completely made a mess of this. I really have. Because I thought we were on 8.5 and we're on 8.4.
That was the calendar change. The content was right. You did the content right. You just got the numbers mixed up. So we're now on 8.5, which is minor amendments to terms of reference delegation.
I want a dementia check, actually, I think. Look, I'm sorry, I thought I was on the right subject, but on the wrong note, actually. So, Petrea, you put me straight, please. Yep.
So we're on 8.5, delegation of authority to make minor editorial changes to committee terms and reference. The leave of the chair, it's just noting that there are just small changes to terms of reference that we'd like to be able to have the delegation of the chief executive to be able to do that. Change in job titles, and if there's a spelling mistake or anything like that, just something minor. And we're just seeking the council approval to do that.
You've actually just asked. I was going to ask for a bit of an example, but certainly you've put it in place. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just going to, I might foreshadow just an amendment that I think would be useful, just so that there's a bit of visibility on maybe some of the changes that are going forward. Because I'd like to just sort of have a bit of a protection in there around what those changes are, so that we actually know what they're happening and when they're happening, kind of thing. So I'm just sort of going to potentially foreshadow an amendment that maybe in the resolution that can just sort of say that any changes are notified to councillors via memo before their action by the delegation.
Can I get clarification around this from somebody, that this applies to only to this, not as a generic recommendation? That's my understanding. Only applies to what we're talking about. Doesn't apply to the fact that you've got licensed.
Minor editorial on terms of references to future. So I actually agree in
Yeah,
resolution 2.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
is,
My
it's
apologies.
this and into the future, but only minor.
My apologies, Councillor Swiggs. Does anybody else want to comment on this? Yeah, Councillor.
I was about to say exactly the same. Yeah, I just think it's good that we see what is being put forward. And when we're all up to speed, we know what the terms and conditions are going to be. And if we have any concerns, then we've got the opportunity to say so.
Through you, Chair, I'm very happy with the questions of transparency. My intention would be that if any minor amendment was needed on any terms of reference, that I would go to the chair of said committee and have a conversation first and make sure that the chair and those committee members are comfortable with that. But also no problem at all in terms of the transparency and being able to have either a memo or an update to the whole of council on any amendments. Very happy for that.
So you're happy with that, Dion? Are you happy that we can make a minor change to what's already there rather than an amendment? Are you happy to propose something to Petrea now? Could it be as much as brought to the council or a relevant committee chair for their endorsement?
So what I propose, I can just email something through to Oliver. Yeah.
But you need to actually get a member of seat.
I've just sent through a something to Oliver. It's just a very minor thing. I think it just will tidy the process up and make it more tight.
All right, councillors, I think we can resume. Are you happy, Ollie, with what you've got there? Can you want to stick that up there so we can have a look at it? Are you happy with that, Dion?
Make it clearer, and you can
Yeah.
propose changes to the terms of reference.
Yes. There you go. Any proposed changes? Okay, wordsmiths. On out of your closets, wordsmith.
Not right.
Okay, let's just take a second. Take it off the screen. Yeah. This is serious stuff, Councillor Beals. Set to go again. So this is a request that the Chief Executive notifies councillors in advance of any proposed changes to committee or subcommittee terms of reference. And are we all listening? Thank you. Dion, are you happy?
So
What was that?
sure. I was going to suggest that make sure Councillor Swiggs is happy.
I was just going to ask him. Councillor Swiggs.
Yeah, I was just thinking, and it's more just the transparency thing, so we know what was going on. I think you know, the chief executive has been involved in that. I mean, I don't want it to be like a big massive thing. I thought it was just a notification of a memo sort of thing, but I think that covers it anyway. So I'm happy with that. And really it is, it's just a visibility thing so that we just know what's happening and when it's happening.
So we've just got some information here, which is going to be released, well, it's being released from Public Excluded into the open. And this is information in the attachment about the Odeon Theatre and the CBD land holdings, which was previously considered in both the council and the Performance Audit and Risk Committee back in the day. And it's recently been approved for release by the Chief Executive through our normal processes.
Okay, thank you, Patrice. Any clarification required on that? Because we will put the motion up in a minute, and then if there's no clarification required, put the motion up, move in a second, and then we can have a discussion if we need to. So moved by, yeah, there it is there. It's moved by Councillor Burns. Oh, so moved by Councillor Edge, seconded by Councillor Burns. Any discussion? Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Edge?
Just speaking to it, it's good that this has come out and publicly released. Just for the update of people, the working group has met with staff and external advisors, and we've since agreed to proceed with a competitive dialogue process. The process is underway with an invitation to participate and advertise through GETS. That process is, so we're now in a tender process, so we can't say any more at this stage about what's happening. But we hope to update council on October the 25th.
7. So this is the chair's report, and there's a number of items there that talk about matters of current interest, emerging issues, and the council should be aware of. And I think the majority of those things we are aware of. The resource management reform legislation, obviously, this is a pretty interesting time for us heading into a general election. And some of the rhetoric flying around about what's going to happen. So we just have to hold tight on that. The government policy statement of land transport, and we've made a number of submissions from this council, from the Regional Transport Committee, a joint statement from myself and Mayor Bowen, Chair of the Mayoral Forum, and also from GC Greater Christchurch Partnership, which is thankful for some things, but still waiting for others, and concerned that National Land Transport Fund still seems to be short of money, and we seem to be borrowing to put it in there. So we've borrowed about 5 billion in the last couple of years to put it into the National Land Transport Fund. And the crazy bit about this is then some of those funds in there have to pay the interest on the money we borrowed, so there's less available. So there's some stuff going on there. Future for local government is an ongoing discussion. I had that discussion in Wellington, and one of our staff members there, Patrick Lindsay, was there. It was a really good discussion from the point of view that all the items that Future for Local Government panel had come up with, those 17 items, were given an opportunity to be viewed by the members there, about 140 members there, and their view whether it was yeah, we can do this, or this, hold on, or no, I'm not in favour of it. And I think we ended up with like 2,500 post-it notes on the wall, Patrick, which was pretty interesting. The person's going to have to go and make some sense out of that. But that's the process we're in. There's a couple of things that underpin what we're doing, which is a consensus, the required consensus, and that sense of localism. We as a regional council set ourselves in a position about localism for us is different from what it might be to a TA, because our localism starts at sort of north of the Clarence River and heads down to the top of the Lindis. And what's localism to us? One of the points I did try and make quite strongly was the fact that Future for Local Government, TAs at the moment only care really essentially about what's in their area, and Christchurch doesn't particularly worry too much about what's going on in Timaru, and Timaru doesn't particularly worry too much about what's going on in Kaikoura. But as soon as you start talking about land, nitrates, water, everybody wants to have a crack at that. and that's not just in this region. So we get lots of advice from outside of here, and plus we've got a number of NGOs who the environmental performance of councils is really important, including Forest and Bird, who we've had that submission from last council meeting about rivers, fish and game, freshwater angling. There's a whole lot of fishing people. EDS are pretty interested in what we do. The Green Party, it's the basis of what they stand for. Greenpeace and others. So there's plenty of people interested in the regional government space and the role that we do on land, air, and water. However, one of the issues that we're trying to bring to that discussion is, when you want to look after the environment, we're over here. We're the ones that do it, because 60 something. How many regional? We've got 16 regional councils, and I think Councillor Davies made the point this morning about Wayne Brown saying, look, what he said, and that's essentially a regional view. Like we need to do it. So how do we get where we're going to get to? Who knows? Anybody want to have a crack at that?
Just to ask a question, that we've had some conversations about what we might think would be the future for local government within Canterbury. How do you represent that conversation at a regional level? Where's the connection, I guess, between what we might think is our way forward to the greater conversation?
I guess it's really hard to know how to get into discussions without actually stepping on someone's toes across the regional space. And one of the things that we talked about and have talked about also with Otago, Southland, ourselves on the West Coast is, for a start of a 10. So, what does a regulator for the South Island look like? Is that something that is generic? Is that something that you can provide? What do there's a whole lot of services there I think you can provide, administrative services that you could provide. It's only opinion, it's not fact. Right? I'm just putting stuff out there. But there's some of those things that we do provide also that are specific to us. Otu Wharekai, for example, Manahuna and what's going on up there, and those special areas that we've got like Whakaropo and Littleton Harbour and those things that require you guys on the ground being involved in it to bring the issues forward is really hard to capture. So the conversation has been formed and, hey, maybe there's a regional opportunity here. So we do things regionally, because the basis of formation for the regional councils is really, really strong. We're one of the only areas, or the only area in the world that did it around catchments. So they're natural things that happen. And as people say, pests and diseases and other things don't really care about boundaries. We know that about wallabies. They like going down into Otago, which is not acceptable.
No, thanks for that. Not a fear, just a nervousness that we potentially have a view of what things might look like, and the conversation that you're having at a regional level or within the sector of the South Island is potentially going in a slightly different direction. So it's how do we find that alignment either at this table or that influence? And I know it's early days, but it's just how do we ensure that we, I guess, as a council feel comfortable with where the conversation is going, as opposed to a view that sits over there somewhere of this is the regional sector of the South Island's view of what it should be. So it's just a question. I don't have an answer today.
One of the things that's really, really great about the conversations that you've had about future local government and in this room on the workshop is it's really, it's going to form the basis of what we're trying to think about as regional council. So we can feed that north, we can feed that into that Te Urukahika view of life. Craig and then, are you? Nook, and then Craig, and then Mac, and then
Kia ora, kai whakahaere. I think just with all of these kind of matters of interest, and particularly you've been specific around the resource management reform legislation, government policy statement on land transport, future of local government. And so I think a really important part of that is actually around the treaty partnership, because it was always about, and when you look at the Ngāi Tahu Councillor's actually specific role, one of the important parts of that role is actually it's about identifying Te Tiriti and its intersection with the Resource Management Reform Bill, Water Services Entity Bill, Te Mana o Te Wai, and then the future of local that local government review. I just think that this is when we talk about sort of South Island, there I go to the fact around a kind of South Island provincial government setup. But it's always when we talk about that and the intersection with the treaty, the importance of this whole thing is around treaty partnership. And so that's something that I just wanted to highlight here at this point, and particularly because we're moving into a general election very shortly. But the Ngāi Tahu Papatupi Runanga have actually not moved actually from their position about the importance of how the treaty intersects with those specific things that the three there that you're actually talking about today, and particularly what's not there is actually how it intersects with water reform. I think that's the important part. But the final thing I want to say is that one thing that we got to do here is actually try and develop that common vision between the treaty partnership, because at the end of the day, when you look at the Ngāi Tahu Rohe and how many, like 10 councils it embraces here, but if you look right across sort of South Island until north of the border, we're all tied to the regional economy and the environment. That's actually where I see this conversation, this corridor, never moving away from that vision that Mana Whenua has.
I think that a lot of that's really good, because I think there's an acceptance that you've got to do it. There's acceptance that if we expect some of that stuff to happen here and across, the other regions and the Takiwa, we've got to do that. That's our role. We can't expect central government to do anything about that at all. And so the provision of where we get to with that is it would be a proposal to central government. Hey, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. And my opinion on that is that will give us more strength than what we've got now. And I mean, I had some really strong comments from Dame Jenny Shippey yesterday about what's going on here in terms of where we sit, and the things that we're doing. And there's some confidence that we're heading in the right direction. And some of the detail around that is obviously yet to be defined, but yeah.
Just wait, one last comment. And that's the importance actually, because when you look at it, where our rohe is situated in Te Waiponamu, one of the really important things is that it's very unique, and that's why the partnership is strong. So we can there are things that will divide us in a lot of ways, but because we actually have that strong Mana Whenua treaty partner relationship, it's always actually going to ensure that we're not actually separated or split. And it's that glue actually that the iwi can actually bring to pull it all together.
I'm not sure whether I got the spanning order right, but I've got Craig, Dion, Ian, and Joe. Were you in that, Joe? No, Joe wasn't. Okay.
Peter, and acknowledge what Tūtahonu has said. I mean, it's definitely part of what I was going to raise. First of all, I think just acknowledge the reform that is going on in local government. I think it is necessary. The Local Government Act, and there's many challenges that we all know around funding and all those sorts of things. So, just acknowledge that. And acknowledge the critical need for regional governance as well. I think that's what we've got to keep pushing, and that's because of those sort of cross-boundary oversight that's needed, sort of cross-catchment, cross-rohe sort of thinking that if you just left it to TLAs, I think that's where we do get issues. So we've got to keep that message going out there. There's obviously the environmental protection side of it too, which, you know, that is really our forte, or should be our forte, and I think that's what we've got to keep promoting as well. It's not something that TLAs have always done as well, so that's something that we've got to keep promoting. And yeah, as Nook's point, the sort of treaty partnership part of it, where this council in particular, but other regional councils have definitely led the way in terms of those mana whenua and iwi partnerships, not doing it perfectly, but definitely more able to do it than some district councils as well. And I think the overlap with the RMA around planning in particular, I think is another critical role. And there is the opportunity, like John has said, for shared services, and you've mentioned it too. And I think that's really good to explore across our region. And so for me, and sort of answer to John's question as well, is I think we really should formalise our thinking on this a little bit further in the next few months. And I don't think we've got, you know, we shouldn't leave it too long. And it might be iterative. It might be like our first go at that, and then you'd update it over time. But we've also got to discuss that with our Papatū Runanga and with our TLAs and with the wider community as well. But I think we should do that, and I think we're working towards that. But that's what I hope we keep doing. We can't take the ease off on that. We've got to keep putting that, because we should put that out to the community. We should put that to government, whoever that is, in October. That we do want these things to go forward, and that's the way we see it happening. Because if we don't, it'll get done to us. And it might get done to us anyway. But we just need to promote a certain way that we see we see this could go as something that we're happy with and think could work. So yeah.
Thanks. I guess coming back to my initial question and your comments around CME, and do we have a centralised South Island CME function? And if I, putting aside what the election may not bring, if we've got a central planning space and we have a central something there and we take the buses out of there, we've all decided that we have a role and a use of having an umbrella across Canterbury. But if we lose all their functions underneath it, what is our actual role, other than a shell that sort of says we govern Canterbury but with no responsibility? So that's the question in my mind is, as we go forward, if we lose too much of our ability and functions, then what is our actual role? Do we justify our existence, even though we believe it's genuinely required across the whole of Canterbury? Those are some of the things in my mind. Once we lose those functions, what is our actual role?
It's a great opportunity, because I think the thing that we had a lawyer fella come and spoke to us, didn't he, Patrick? And it's an interesting guy, because he said, moving the whole idea from what you want and what you need to why you want it and need it, and what is your area of interest in the problem. So being able to actually discuss those things gives you an opportunity to try and this certainly is nothing that I've got any more knowledge than anybody on. It just so happens that I've been asked to do this, but I think the discussions that we're having here are really, really good, and I think they're strong, and I've got really good feedback from staff on those things, and I think we should just keep kicking on with that. So Ian or Dion, one of you?
If I may hop in, Dion, because it segues straight directly from Councillor Sunkel's comments. I understood, Peter, earlier in your presentation, you talked about Canterbury would have, the regional council would still have a regulatory role. And I think this goes back to John's point, is that if we have no discretion in setting policy, then there's no point in having a regional council if all we're doing is regulate, being the regulator and compliance monitor for direction sent down from Wellington. There's no point in having a democratically elected regional government that can't make a decision. That just seems to me to be a waste of money and time.
It's actually kind of on that point as well, but I note that this is the last council meeting before the election. The next council meeting is on the 25th of October, and depending on what happens in the election, there's a heck of a lot of change that will happen for all of local government. Are we well prepared for after the election happens to sort of have a good, memo or briefing or whatever about where to next. Because I'm just worried that we're going to have a heck of a lot of catch up, I think, with all the stuff that's going on. Because one hand, we've got dialing back of a whole lot of regulatory, I don't want to say overreach, but it's almost overreach of government agencies sort of dictating to what we can do. And then on the other hand, it's kind of a bit more of a status quo. So from your conversations that you're having in the local government space, and especially last week, and you've mentioned it here, but are we well prepared for that eventuality if that in fact happens?
I'm completely confident that Te Kahaka, which is the representative of the regionals, is hugely well prepared. They've set themselves up over the last 2 years, and I'd like you to comment on this actually, Stephanie, with advice from senior people within the regional governance area on the depth of understanding of the things we need to do, and a huge engagement with central government on these things. And we know that like the top bit's going to change, but the bit underneath, the people that do all the work, the ministries may change. They may change some structure, but the key people won't. And the key people keep talking to these key people. And it's a bit like the old Yes Minister stuff, like these guys have got a lot of power, a lot of say in what goes on. So I think from a regional perspective, Stephanie, I want you to comment on this, but I think we are in a pretty good shape.
So I guess thank you through you, Chair. There's two things. In terms of us as officers functioning with change, we are prepared for that. The quantum of change depends upon the outcome of democracy, which is the election, which is yet to come. And officers are very clear that until those votes are cast and until those parties who win have to create a coalition government or otherwise, we will not know what that policy is. That can take some time, as we've seen in the past, and sometimes it can be quick. Once those parties are aligned and we have a government and the Governor General has done her job, then we have new ministers and we will need to work our way through that. I am confident that we have the skill and the talent to be able to work it through. And I am certain that we will need to come back to you should significant changes happen. But I guess as an officer, I am very clear that I am a servant to elected members and to a democracy and central government at the moment that has yet to proceed. So in that context, I need to leave that alone. But in terms of the organization's readiness, we're prepared to that extent.
Thanks, Chair. Just something slightly different related to the last meeting we had. On page 215, a reference to Tom Kay from Forest and Bird presenting a video about nature-based solutions. And I want to commend staff and yourself for managing to secure $360,000 in funding from MFE to investigate ways of working with nature to build resilience and better protect communities from future flooding. The media release on Monday was exciting. I think it's kind of suggests to me that we are on track with our philosophy that we have in our long-term plan for 30-year infrastructure in terms of transitioning perhaps from traditional engineering to more nature-based solutions. And that's really in response to the degree of climate change and the effects of that. But I'll just read this quote that you had. The funding will allow us to investigate how we can make more room for the rivers, how protection and restoration of coastal freshwater and brackish wetlands can provide coastal flood mitigation, and how Matarangi Māori can be incorporated into flood protection measures to improve outcomes for the community. This is a significant move, I believe. Thank you.
My sentiments, but certainly I couldn't line those words up properly. That's Stefflin's people that did that after talking to me about it. I'm not that smart to be able to write like that, but I think this shows you that, you know, our intent was, look, let's give us 2.5 billion over 10 years and we can fix this stuff up. This is going to be that old movie quote, you know, any given Sunday, Al Pacino. So this is going to be inch by inch. It's going to be, you know, and we'll get a breakthrough. We've just got to keep at it. The sentiment keeps getting expressed about how we do this, and I think we assure that we have the confidence to be able to do it. But you know, DIA and others, we just need to get them a bit further down the track. But I think we'll get there. I think it's a really good piece of work. And Stephen, I know you've only been here a week while, but your staff should be commended for their ability to actually take taxpayers' money under what we did with that, you know, that Jobs for Nature and the COVID money, and actually complete the circle, complete the audit. So that gives central government confidence in what we can and can't do.
I just wanted to return back to before Councillor Edge's comment, just back to that take around, and kia ora Stephanie for articulating very well, you know, where the management principle side of the council actually sits. Just with Councillor Sweeks, I think what he was trying to get to was from a governing point of view, it's really important that there's a bit of preemption going on around thinking, because there will be different options. I understand that, but if you look on one of the options, there could be actually quite a big change that's a coming, and it could actually really affect the makeup of this stadium. So there's that. There's also other things around that are directly related to the environment that could change. So it's actually just trying to get some kind of sense so that it's no surprises. If that option happens, okay, we've done some thinking. If the other option, and whatever that is, then we've actually had some thinking around that as well. So I don't think it'll hurt actually to have that sort of general kind of corridor about those different options and what they are.
I think that's right. I mean, I think we've done enough where we can to talk to across the parties. I've had like 15 or I'd like to say 20, but I don't think it's 20 potential representatives through my office and talk to others about, you know, the things that we're trying to do. And one of the messages that we're trying to put across against PT and rivers and those sorts of things is that we understand what our requirement is to do this work. And we actually, in a lot of cases, have got that work done. Like GCP is a good example in terms of what public PT futures, good examples of actually having a really good thought about what public transport should look like and where the barriers are and where the hurdles are, what we should be doing about rivers and those sorts of things, where we should be doing with, you know, biosecurity. We do that thinking. I think that's the difficult place if you want to go back to future local government, is actually how that fits in there and how that's taken into account. The message, I think the key message that I picked up in Wellington, it's not going to get any easier in November than what it is now. Yeah, there's just going to be a different set of stuff that to deal with. Anyway, that's enough. I'll move that, receive the report from the chair, and I'd like to second that. Thank you, Dion, actually. No further discussion, I wouldn't think. So all those in favour, please say aye. All those against, that's carried. Thank you for that discussion. It's worthwhile. Now, we are moving in to public excluded. Derek Walsh, public transport remains after public have been excluded from 9.2.3. Climate Emergency Response Fund bids. Debbie Harris, team leader, property and land management remains. The deed of lease, Amanda. I don't know if Amanda's here, is she? Maybe we should. It says here, Amanda. Do we need Amanda here for that deed of lease?
No, it's for 9.2.5. Yeah, that goes back to that, and this is a new one.
Okay. All right. So rather than read all that out, can I get someone to move that we go into public excluded, please? Thank you, Nook. Seconded by Councillor Burns. All those in favour, please say aye. All those against, that's carried. Okay, just to note that Councillor Cranwell's left the chamber at 2:30. There's two things that we need to do before we close up. One is that after we started the meeting, we had an apology text in for the meeting from Councillor Robinson, so we need to note that. And the second item is to deal with the deputation from Mr. King, and that will lie on the table, right? So that's where that will be. I don't know who started with Karakia. Craig did.
Right. Next meeting. Is that where we're at? Our next meeting.
Yeah. So the next meeting is the 25th of October, 2023. Yep.
O kia ora tātou. Ai Karakia Whakamutunga o tātou nei hui. Kia tau ngā manakitanga o ngā me karo ki runga ki tēnā o tātou ko mahia te hua mā kihiki kia toita reo, kia toita mana, kia toita aroha, tūturu whakamaua kia tīna, haumi e hui e tāki.
I've got one last thing that I want to add. Up the waz, baby.